So I have a few announcements before I kick it over to a couple of our other leaders of the Student Advisory Board to tell you more about some programming later on in the semester. But for those of you who aren't familiar with the Dole Institute of Politics, we practice a politics of connection here. We're looking really to connect across difference. So we're a bipartisan organization. A lot of our programming reflects a bipartisan perspective explicitly, with a Republican and a Democrat being represented in a lot of our panels. Last semester, we had former members of Congress, Sherry Bustos, who's a Democrat, appear with our friend Luke Messer, who's a Republican. Early, a couple of years ago, we had Senator Tom Daschle and Trent Lott appear together. Members of the Kansas legislature, R's and D's appearing together, really try to emphasize relationship building, the opportunity that exists among differing points of view, and how we can move together forward. So thanks for being a part of that and your interest in that, for being here at the Dole Institute. Next week, our first Student Advisory Board meeting of the semester is on the 4th, next Tuesday at 5:30 here. It'll be in Simon's Media Room up towards the front of the building, so plan to attend that. In addition, we have some other programs coming up on Wednesday, February 5th at 3 p.m. We'll host our first Fort Leavenworth series in partnership with the U.S. Army Command and General Staff College at Fort Leavenworth, the first installment of a series on technology and war. This program will focus on Germany's strategic bombing campaign in World War I. That same week on Thursday, this is a busy week coming up next week, guys. Thursday, February 6th at 7 p.m., we're going to host our Elizabeth Dole Women in Leadership Lecture. Our featured guest, our honoree this year, is Sharon McMahon, who's an educator and a leader, communications leader. She has over 1 million followers on Instagram and also a New York Times bestselling book called The Small and the Mighty. We'll be talking about how she established her career and made that transition from the classroom into public communications, how she's adding good information out in the world, and how we can all be more constructive in our leadership online. So you'll look forward to that. And then finally, next Friday at noon, we have a students exclusive program, Pizza and Politics. Nathan Binstock is our Student Advisory Board Pizza and P&P coordinator, and he'll be talking about the role of the wealthy, the fame and fortune role of the wealthy in politics. All right. Let's see, make sure I get all my messages, my instructions from Kenna here. We look forward to seeing you again. I hope you'll get involved in the Student Advisory Board. In addition to helping produce some of the programming that we do at the Institute, there's lots of different service, volunteer, social opportunities. It's really a great place to be, and a wonderful community of folks ready to connect and enjoy each other. So I hope we'll see you again. And with that, I will turn it over to our spring discussion group coordinators, Braden Bangelin and Jacob McCarthy. Sorry, I didn't mean to pair you there. McCarty, to tell you what's up next for discussion groups this semester. Guys, take it away.
Thank you, Audrey. Nice seeing. Oh. Go for it. Nice seeing a lot of new faces around here. We have excellent programming coming up this spring. We're really excited to have you all here. My name is Braden, and I'm one of the discussion group coordinators here at the Dole Institute. What's a discussion group? So every semester, the Dole Institute hosts a program series around a single topic with a single discussion group fellow. These are all pertinent topics, and they're going to be very exciting given our political climate and the types of conversations we're going to have there. Discussion groups happen at Wednesdays at 4, and they happen in this room, so super accessible. We hope to see you all there.
Yes, I am Jacob McCarty. I am also one of the discussion group coordinators this semester, and an incentive for you guys to come is there is catering, so there will be more food. And as well, people who regularly attend may be invited to a exclusive dinner with our guests and speakers afterwards. So make sure you show up to a lot, because you can get special invitations and perks.
Now we'd like to introduce our DG Fellow this spring 2025, Mr. B.
Hello, yes, my name is Matt Beat, and on the internet I'm known as Mr. Beat, and I'm very excited. I'm honored to be the fellow of the spring for the program, which will be focusing on the power of the presidency. If you're familiar with my YouTube videos, I have a lot of president videos, and this is a topic I'm pretty passionate about. the American president, the history of the president. So we're going to have a 5-part series, and each program is going to focus on a different thing. The first one at the end of February is going to focus on how the power of the presidency has grown, even within the executive branch. The second one will focus on how the power has grown in comparison to Congress. The third one, how the power of the presidency has grown in comparison to the Supreme Court. The fourth one, how the power of the presidency is, I'm repeating myself a lot here, but that's okay, has grown in comparison to the states. And the fifth one, looking at the voters and how, like, things like the Electoral College and stuff like that. So I'm very excited. I wish all of you in this room will come, and we'll have special guests I'll be interviewing up here on this stage, and it'll be a grand old time. So thank you.
Hello, my name is Nathan Binstock. As our director Audrey Coleman mentioned earlier, we have a full slate of pizza and politics programs coming up this semester. I am the pizza and politics coordinator here at the Dole Institute of Politics, and I will tell you about our program so far. So last semester we covered a variety of topics that range from the national debt to the TikTok ban that I'm sure the majority of the students in the crowd are very familiar with. Pizza and Politics is always on Fridays from noon to 1 p.m. And this semester they will all take place on Jayhawk Inc., which is on the second floor of the Kansas Union. We have 2 Pizza and Politics programs coming up this February. The first will be on February 7th, and the second will be on February 21st, so make sure you mark your calendars. Our first Pizza and Politics program will be on February 7th, and it's covering the evolving role of the wealthy in politics. Our guests for this program are Misty Hedgenes, an associate professor in the School of Public Affairs and Administration, and Eric Thomas, a lecturer in the School of Journalism and a columnist with the Kansas Reflector. If you're interested in enjoying some free pizza and learning what effects public figures like Elon Musk or Taylor Swift have on our political system, make sure you show up. Now, I'll hand things over to Kenna to get today's program started.
Hi guys, as Nathan said, I'm Ken McNally and I am the Student Advisory Board Coordinator here, and thank you guys all for coming, and I am so excited to introduce you to tonight's guests. So first we have Lauren Green. She is a congressional and policy reporter with National Journal. She is also known on the Hill for her TikToks with members, highlighting a lighter side of politics. Prior to joining National Journal, Lauren served as the DC correspondent for the University of Oklahoma's Gaylord News and has contributed to Texas Monthly. She graduated from the University of Oklahoma with a Bachelor's of Arts in Journalism and is now pursuing a master's degree at the University of Texas at Austin. And we also have Paul Haven, who is the Vice President and Head of Global News Gathering at the Associated Press, based in New York. He is in charge of more than 1,200 reporters, photographers, and video journalists reporting across the country and globe. Paul has spent the majority of his 30-year career at AP, based internationally in countries such as Afghanistan, Pakistan, Cuba, and Mexico. During his 3-year tenure leading news gathering, the AP has won 3 Pulitzer Prizes and its first ever Academy Award for coverage over the war in Ukraine and other stories. We're so honored to have both of you here with us tonight, and thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us.
So to start us off, Paul, will you tell us a little bit more about your background and how you got into journalism?
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for having me. This is really awesome to be here. I've never been to the University of Kansas, so it's exciting for me. And this is a great room as well. I've been a journalist for about 30 years. I think when I was younger, I always wanted to write and to travel. And I was a history major in college. And it just seemed like journalism was a way to witness history and to write and travel. And it's worked out that way. And it's been really, really, really exciting. And I have gotten to see a lot of history. And so that's what drew me to it, and that's what keeps me going.
And Lauren, what about you?
Yeah, so I got started about 2 years ago in DC now. I started as a Congress reporter for National Journal. And then a few months into that, I started making TikToks on the Hill, which is kind of what I've made my brand of now. I love, like he said, just getting to witness history. I was at the inauguration last week. I have gotten to cover so many things. My first week starting was when the speaker was ousted, which was just kind of surreal, being 23 and witnessing things that I had seen all in college. So I've been doing that. I've been doing it ever since, and I love it.
And Paul, as a reporter at a traditional or legacy news organization, how does your style of news gathering and reporting differ from non-traditional news organizations?
At AP, our main core sort of reason for being is to be factual, to be accurate, and to be nonpartisan. So I'll just tell you a little bit about AP for those of you who don't know. AP is a nonprofit news organization. It's a cooperative. We have no shareholders. There's no billionaire in charge of us. There's no government behind us. We're truly independent. And that's really rare to the point of being almost unique in the news ecosystem. And so we really lean into that, and that's really important to us. It's good to be fast, but more than anything, we want to make sure that people trust us and believe us when we report, especially in the very partisan times that we live in. So that's the sort of core of what we do, is try to give people facts wherever they are on the political divide or wherever they are in the world, and they can do with those facts what they want.
And Lauren, since you're at a government affairs company, how does that sort of influence the way in which you report?
We do it a little bit differently. AP is incredible for breaking news. We're a little bit less catered to the breaking news, more catered to a breakdown of the policy. I never really thought I would get into policy reporting, but I've loved it. So kind of on my day-to-day, I go in, and instead of as soon as something happens newsy, I'm at my computer writing and it's published within 10 minutes. We do a little bit more of a breakdown. So like I walk around, I talk to members about what's happening and what the future of that looks like. So whenever you do policy reporting, it's a little bit more of a broken down, longer form pieces that you're looking to the future, which is looked at by a lot of people in DC. It's looked at by a lot of Senate staffers, House staffers, and lobbying firms. And so it's a little bit different than just like the fast breaking news. I do love the fast breaking news. It's fun, it's addicting, and it's cool to be in it, but it's also fun to get to break it down and look at it from a more futuristic perspective.
And Lauren, can you tell us about the role of social media in your position as a journalist?
Yeah, social media is everything as a journalist now. Twitter is definitely, or X is definitely the space that journalists use the most in Washington. I found that harder to break into, which is what led me to starting the TikTok series. I think that TikTok has a really large gap in accurate news. It's a lot of influencers who are providing information on something that they're getting secondhand. So I'm not saying it's necessarily incorrect, but they're not getting it straight from the source, which has led to a lot of misinformation spread. And so I saw kind of a gap and a lack of accurate news information on TikTok, and I took that and ran with it, and so far it's worked out. It's let me put some accurate news out there, whereas Twitter is bombarded with a lot of news, so I hope that it's kind of provided an in on a social media that was kind of lacking before.
And Paul, how does the Associated Press use social media?
Yeah, okay, so that's a good question, Kenna. One other thing about the Associated Press is we're really a B2B business at our heart, right? We license content, photos, video, text, to thousands of news organizations around the world. But recently, about 2 years ago, we relaunched apnews.com, which is our own website, which was our sort of first real effort to really connect directly with audiences. And it's doing really well. You should all download it. It's free. And I think last week it was named this, I think it's the fourth fastest growing website in the world. So it's really working. But our social strategy is really to let people know about AP journalism, because before we didn't really have to do that. We would just license our content to the news organizations around the world, and they would put it out. But now that we do have a kind of direct connection with audiences, we want people to know about us, and so we're on all sorts of platforms. And basically, the idea is to get people to engage with AP journalism and then stick around and become frequent users of apnews.com.
And you guys have sort of talked a little bit about how journalists share stories on social media. Lauren, can you talk about how do you use social media to find stories?
Yeah, I definitely use social media every day to find stories. You'll find reporters in DC, they tweet every single move that Congress makes. I'm not kidding. Like, a member of Congress could eat something for lunch and it's going to be on Twitter. Everything that they do is on Twitter. So I kind of find the stories that I write about and the stories that I also read about on social media. I follow a bunch of reporters. I think that a lot of the decline in people having trust in the media is that they don't know the reporters behind the stories. And whenever you kind of pick and choose reporters that you like and follow them and you trust them, it's easier to find news that you can engage in and find on social media, which is kind of what I've done. And then also, like I said, the stories that I write, I also have found on social media. I did a story last week on the 11 members of Congress that are 35 and under, and I talked to all 11 of them. I thought of that story idea because I saw a graphic on Instagram that was like, these 11 members they are 2% of Congress and they represent a third of the electorate. And I was like, wow, that's a story that's not being covered. So I went after it, and social media plays a huge role in the things that I cover and like finding it like little outlets of things that aren't being covered, but also how I find stories from all the reporters that I trust on the Hill.
Yeah, and Paul, what about at AP?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have a lot of reporters who have beats, and they do the same thing, and they follow the right, all the people in their beat, and they find news that way. I would just say, another thing that we do. I mean, we have a really big footprint, as Kenneth said, we have about 1,300 people around the world. But like even so, we're not everywhere, and social media is everywhere. And so, if first word of that earthquake, or somebody who made a harrowing escape from their house in LA or whatever, you'll often find that on social media. And so, it is a tip service for us that we find things, and then we get a lot of visual journalism that way as well. We have a global team that looks for what we call user-generated content, UGC, and we try to find it. We have to verify it, make sure it's accurate. It actually depicts what the person says it depicts. If we are going to use it, we need to get the rights to that video and make sure that the person posting it actually has the rights to it. So that's a really big part of our journalism. And we're in some places where it's not easy to find, to actually get out there. And so social media has been absolutely instrumental in helping us tell stories.
And you've led us pretty much perfectly into the next question. What's the importance of the information that's available on social media being factual?
For me?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's important. It isn't all factual, so that's also important to know. I think that the reason that legacy media companies like the AP should be on all these platforms, I think we're on 9 platforms. I looked it up, is to put factual journalism out there, but there's a lot swirling around out on social media, and I think it's really important to not believe everything you see, and look at who the source is.
And Lauren, how do you make your own factually based reporting wanted by the algorithm and attractive to social media users?
I do think that the algorithm doesn't necessarily love factually based reporting just because trust in the media has declined so much. It's not the attractive thing that people see on social media. It's not Harry Sisson at the White House. It's not those things that do that. So I think that kind of meeting users where they're at. My TikTok content is very casual comparatively to my Twitter or how I write my stories. It's kind of meeting them where they're at. I don't use caps lock. On Twitter, on TikTok, which I would never tweet something without caps lock on. My videos they don't look very set up. They're super casual. I'll literally set my phone up against the Capitol and I'll be like, hey, AOC, want to come get in a video? She's like, okay. So it's kind of meeting those viewers. I know that TikTok is a casual social media, and so it's meeting those viewers where they're at instead of whenever I've been to members' offices, they sometimes will do a whole stage setup, and I'm like, I think that this is where it starts to get disingenuous. I think people like TikTok because it comes off genuine. And so kind of using each social media platform where people, or what people are looking for on that. So Twitter, I'm more professional and use more professional verbiage. And then on TikTok, I kind of meet them where the algorithm is.
Yeah. And Paul, I'll turn to you to start this one off. What are the implications of social media sites such as X and Meta ceasing standard fact-checking and moving to more of these community note systems? How is that impacting the amount of facts we see on the internet?
Yeah, I think it's a little early to tell. I mean, I don't know. It's pretty recent. And I think the evidence is kind of unclear, like on whether community notes is going to work or not going to work. But I would say, fact checking and checking facts, again, it comes back to the source. So if you believe in the source where you're getting your information, then whether you're reading it on Facebook or Twitter or TikTok, whatever, I think that's what's most important. And so like at a company like ours, fact checking is absolutely fundamental to what we do. I mean, we do a lot of fact checking in the kind of modern sense of the word, but also just like going back 180 years, that's what journalists at AP do. We check the facts and then we're very careful with them and then we put them out so you can know that they're right. And I think, as you said, I think that there's a lot of, the algorithms maybe don't push that stuff up all the time, but it's out there, and if you follow the right news organizations or the right individual journalists, you can find it.
And what do you think, Lauren?
I do think that I agree. We don't necessarily know the implications of it yet, and I think that with everything going on right now with the new administration, we really don't know the implications of it, but I do think that media literacy is really hard in this day and age because news media is abundant, and I find it hard for me as a journalist who is in it every day to find accurate sources of media. It is my full-time job, and I still struggle to find accurate media. So I do think that the decline of that is going to make media literacy just a little bit harder to reach, and in a time that media literacy is already hard. But I don't think we fully know yet.
Yeah.
Can I just jump in? I think it's not just things that are inaccurate. It's that, if you get all your news on social media, you're getting what the algorithm thinks you want to see. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's inaccurate, but it's not the whole picture. I mean, you're getting pushed whatever it is that, and they're really good at it. I mean, they're really good at it. And so it's not necessarily all false. It's just not a real complete picture. And I think if you want to be informed, you have to go past that.
And Lauren, I'll turn to you for the next few questions because we're going to
Okay.
focus on TikTok a little bit. So the 2024 general election saw a rise in the usage of TikTok as a source of information, factual and false. How has this rise shifted the way information is presented? You've touched a little bit about this, but how has it changed how people are getting information, who it's coming from, that kind of thing?
I think our generation really values personal connection, especially Gen Z. I've seen it in the workplace, the way that we've kind of shifted how management is. I think that we're just more casual because we're looking for that human connection. And I think that that's why people on TikTok have kind of turned and looked to influencers for their input because they seem human, they seem real. It's putting a face to the name and it's being explained at a level that's digestible, whereas sometimes I think the news is not as easily digestible. I find myself watching a TikTok and then turning to my roommate and being like, look what this says, before I look it up, which is something I have to catch myself and actually look it up because it feels so factual, because it feels like I have a relationship with this person over the screen. And so I think that definitely led to a lot of misinformation, or like you said, not a full picture being spread. I think if you were on TikTok, whether you are a Republican or a Democrat, I think that you had a very skewed outlook of the election. I don't think that you necessarily could have seen what happened coming because the algorithm is giving you either only things from your point of view, and I think that kind of blindsided the left on election night. So I think that definitely had a really large impact on how people were keeping up and what people thought of the election, and I do think that also led to the devastation of Democrats in these last 2 months, because they really, if you were on that side of TikTok, I think that most Democrats thought that they had a really large chance and that it wasn't going to be the split that it was.
And since TikTok has been banned, unbanned, will it be banned again? How has that impacted how the app is used? Have you seen any changes with like how the algorithm is working? Like how are you seeing reporters still using it? That kind of thing.
It's a little touch and go, depending on the week. I've definitely seen some pushback from members of Congress wanting to be in videos. I know that a lot of times, anytime that they've told me no to being in a video, it's because of the ban. And so I think that that has something to do with it. A lot of members won't get on TikTok, which does leave, again, a really large gap. Every single member of Congress is on Instagram. Every member of Congress is on X. But TikTok is a very limited number of members on it. So I definitely think that that has had an effect on the algorithm. I know that recently people have been saying that the algorithm has been a little bit different since the ban. I haven't necessarily gotten to see how that shift has been since it's only been like a week. But we'll see if what happens in 70 days now.
And are you preparing, like how are you preparing now
Yeah.
that it's not entirely clear if your presence on TikTok will still be there in
Yeah.
71 days?
I moved, I started an Instagram account to do Reels. I'm not sure how different the algorithm is with politics on Reels. I have my Twitter, I'm just doing my normal, every day I post my stories on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. So I have always done them across all three platforms just to get a maximum reach. Trying to start up on Instagram Reels, we'll see. Hopefully it works. But I think that people on the Hill have responded well to what I've done. So hopefully, it's just kind of spreading yourself. I've talked to, like I said, I'm in a master's program right now, and I've talked to a lot of my advisors about it, and they just said get on every platform possible. So that's what I'm doing.
And now shifting away from social media platform-specific questions to a broader discussion on this threat of mis and disinformation and the politicization of the truth. Paul, how has this threat of mis and disinformation changed over in your time at AP, the last 3 decades?
Yeah, I mean, well, a lot. I think we are in incredibly polarized and times, and so social media or the spread of information that's not always accurate has definitely not been, has definitely been a factor in that. I think that social media also, makes journalists much more accessible. I mean, you can be, and I'm sure you get a lot of abusive stuff, and our journalists get just terrible, sometimes really disturbing and vitriolic stuff thrown at them when they report things, stuff that would, probably never be said or done, done in the physical world, and so that can be really difficult, especially for young journalists, and we have teams who help them cope with that, or will take them off of their social, so that and monitor it for them, so that they can kind of take a break from stuff like that. So it's definitely challenging, and I do think journalists are easy targets because you're out there, your name is out there, and especially if you've got a real presence on social. So it's these are interesting times. I do think it's can be discouraging, but it's also probably never been more important to be a journalist and to try to make sense of things for people. But it can be hard.
And how have you seen that in your work, Lauren?
Yeah, I remember sitting in one of my political journalism classes in college, and one of my professors was like, one of the hardest parts about being a journalist after the rise of social media is that politicians used to fight over the same fact, but just how to deal with that fact. And now they're fighting over the facts themselves, and they see facts differently, and they spread facts differently. And they were like, in your reporting, you're gonna run into which fact is right. Like, you have one member of Congress saying this fact, and then this member of Congress completely just denying that fact. And I will say that that has been one of the hardest parts about reporting in this age and polarization, is that they're not fighting about the facts anymore, or like how to deal with the facts. They're fighting about what the fact is. And I think that's been one of the hardest parts reporting with the rise of polarization. And then, like you were saying, being a journalist is I will say, one of the most humbling jobs in the world. You will get humbled every single day. I don't know if y'all on TikTok have seen the rejection therapy. This is like going to work and facing rejection therapy every single day. But just the comments, you kind of just take a lot of people's political frustration, and you're the forefront of it because it's where they're getting the news. So you kind of just have to have tough skin to face that.
And can you talk, Lauren, a little bit more about how like this politicization of the truth like has changed your reporting? Like how are you determining which of these facts that we're arguing over like is the true one?
I think that you have to talk to a lot more people to get to the truth now. I don't know if you'd agree with me on that. I think that since things are being argued over, you have to state both sides and then also state facts that you have found in your reporting. I think that it just takes a lot more in-depth reporting now, and talking to a lot more people to get to the truth than it would have prior.
I would say from a kind of audience perspective, people don't have as much trust in general in the media or in government or in any sort of institutions. And so for us, one of the things we did, so like one of the things AP is known for is we have this really unique role in American elections, right? We call the elections. And most countries have a sort of central institution that sort of calls elections, but we don't because we don't really have a federal election. We have 50 state elections, and we call that. What we've tried to do, and we really leaned into this last election, is put out a lot more, like show our work, put out a lot more explanatory journalism, like why did we call this state for Trump, or why did we call this state for Harris, or whatever. We don't just do the presidential, we do all the down ballot races as well. And we'll actually put journalists on camera explaining, like there's just not enough votes outstanding for this candidate to catch up. And so that's one of the ways we're trying to kind of counter that lack of trust and the as you say, politicization of the truth, because there is a truth, right? I mean, there is still truth. And it doesn't always work, but I think it's been very useful. And, those stories got huge engagement on social and just in general. So I think that's important. Like, don't assume, maybe 30 years ago, you could just assume that people would trust you, and you can't do that now. You have to kind of try your best to make them see why they should trust you.
And has this been a global trend that you've seen in your reporting, or is it more United States or Western-centric?
That's a really good question. I think it's global. I mean, maybe not universal, but I think it's global. We're seeing similar issues in Latin America and Europe, all over in Asia. So yeah, I think it's global. Yeah.
All right, and then our last question before we shift into audience Q&A. So be thinking about if you have any questions. Starting with you, Lauren, how can and should college students become more media literate?
I think that one of the things I said earlier is finding news sources and reporters that you trust and following them pretty closely. I think that's how I kind of stayed integrated into the news. I have a lot of people reach out to me. I'm from Texas, and so I've seen growing up firsthand that like trust in the media is so low that people reach out to me a lot at home and they're like, what should I follow? I would say that my biggest piece of information is to sign up for like an email newsletter or find a morning podcast. I listen to probably 10 or 15 political podcasts every morning. That's not the norm, just my norm. And just listening to, like, doing one thing every morning, I would say either whatever works better for you, a podcast or a morning newsletter, and just kind of get that like quick hit news digest that you trust in the morning. And then if you're on social media throughout the day, you're gonna see things that coincide with what you read that morning, and you can kind of have a better grasp on if what you're seeing on social media that day is accurate and fair and depicts the whole picture.
And what about you, Paul?
Well, first of all, I'd say I'm less worried about your generation than I am, to be honest, your parents and grandparents. I think you guys grew up in a digital world, and you know just instinctively the pros and cons of the way information is disseminated today. But I would say, to your point, I would find, I get a lot of my information on social media, and I think there's nothing wrong with that. I would just be aware, as I said before, that you're getting a certain picture that these algorithms are smarter than us, and they're very good at giving you what they think you want to hear. And so I would just supplement that with, at least one or two other news sources. It could be a podcast, it could be a news website that you really trust, and that maybe when you go on, you read something that you don't agree with, or that you end up reading an article or looking at a video about a subject that you didn't know you were interested in, because that's the way to sort of keep broadening your mind and keep yourself open to other viewpoints. So I really think that's very important to just being a well-informed citizen.
All right, and now we'll start with some audience Q&A. If you have a question, you can go ahead and raise your hand, and one of our student workers will come around with a microphone for you.
What's a story you wrote that you wish got more traction?
Oh, do you have anything you think of first?
I haven't written a
off the
story in a
top
little
of your
while.
head? I actually did a few weeks ago a story on where Democrats think that they can work with Republicans going into a trifecta in the House, Senate, and in the president or in the White House. I think that that's something that we don't see often. We see a lot of divide, especially on social media. You see the big names in politics, and I watch them. So they go and vote on a bill on the House floor, and they walk right off, and there's these cameras right off the floor, and they could get in front of the camera, and they are going off about how much they hate Democrats. They turn, they walk off camera, and they high-five AOC. Like, it's definitely underreported on how much bipartisanship there is. I know that obviously that is kind of, that's broken down, but I did do a story on Democrats where they can see themselves working with Trump, and almost every single Democrat that I asked did have areas of policy that they could see bipartisanship, and I think that that's something that is not represented well in the media, just because it is so partisan.
Mm-hmm.
That's really good. I mean, I haven't written a story in a little while, but I would say, for me sometimes, because I am, dealing with journalists around the world, it's sometimes frustrating that, the big stories, whether it's the US election or the wars in the Middle East and in Ukraine, they get so much attention that there is a lot going on in the world that we don't have enough time for. We've done amazing journalism from Africa over the last year, and it's just really hard to get attention, and these are really important and serious stories. So I think, I don't know how to solve that, but I do think that, we're living in a time where huge events are happening. It wasn't always like this. And it can be frustrating because there are really brave people out there getting those stories, or brave people who are telling stories about, and I don't know how to break through with some of that stuff.
All right, and then there was one up here.
I know that there are some young reporters at this table, and I'm sure there are more sprinkled throughout. I would just be curious, for kind of young upcoming reporters, what would be a piece of advice or some skills you think would be important to develop as people are starting their career as journalists?
Well, I would say the thing I would say is go anywhere, be open to, so long as you feel safe about it, but it's a hard industry. It's a hard industry to break into. But what you have going for you as a young person is that you are untethered, hopefully, and you can go and do anything. And so take that chance, whatever it is, whether it's someplace in this country that you never thought you'd be, or something overseas. That's what I did in the early days of my career, and I didn't have a lot of experience, but you get it pretty quickly. And so that's the main thing. And that's just an attitude. And then I would say in this day and age, with budgets shrinking and news organizations under pressure, if you can work in more than one format, that's really helpful. If you can shoot photos and video, or shoot photos and do reporting, that's really, really important, because news organizations don't often have the money to send somebody who's an expert in all three formats to every single story.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything he said. I would say, number one, don't get discouraged. It is I was in y'all's shoes applying to jobs 2 years ago, and it was honestly one of the most discouraging things I think that I've ever done. I applied to hundreds of papers before I got the job that I'm in now, and I was this close to being like, reporting's not for me, I'm gonna go back to school and I'm gonna do something else. It's an incredibly hard industry to break into, especially if you're looking to go nationally or worldwide politics. So I would definitely say don't get discouraged. It's incredibly discouraging, but you'll find your fit, and if you have the ambition to get there, you will get there. It just might take some time. Along with that, I would get to know anyone and everyone you can know. As a reporter, even now, like going forward and before this, I get a coffee with somebody in DC every single day. Every single day, I do not go to work without getting a coffee, because networking in this industry is everything. It's all about who you know. It's all about the person you can call up for your source, for your story. I think I was in an interview one time, and one of the interview questions was, how many members of Congress do you have their cell phone numbers? So everything you do is about sourcing. Everything you do is about getting to know people and connecting with people, and it's a who you know industry. So
Totally.
I would really just say, if you see someone in the job you want or at a paper you want, message them on LinkedIn, get coffee with them, get to know as many people as possible.
I think I have a friend whose wife is a pretty senior executive at one of the networks, and she was saying she never says no to a coffee. She'll always, and I was thinking she must be extremely busy, network.
Yeah.
If you've got an opportunity to meet somebody, you just never know. It's always sort of serendipitous, it's you got to be ready for your lucky break. Just as many, you put yourself out there, and you're much more likely to find something.
Yeah.
What other questions do you guys have? All right, I see one in the back.
Hello, thank you for being here. Many people believe that journalism duty is to protect democracy, and in the recent years, many people on both sides on different occasions have been attacking journalists and saying that they do not protect it but hurt it. And particularly in the last several election cycles, the losing side often blamed journalists, at least partially, on their loss. As political journalists, what do you have to respond to this criticism that all journalists are biased and it's impossible to be truly bipartisan in this profession?
Yeah. At Oklahoma, a really large portion of our journalism degree was in journalism ethics, going back to bias and objectivity. I think that there's a difference in bias and objectivity. As a journalist, I feel that both of us work for nonpartisan news organizations, which I love. I do completely agree that it is on us to provide information so that people can go and make informed decisions based on that information. But I do think that there is a difference between objectivity and bias. I remember my capstone professor said, bias is kind of, whenever you go into an interview, it's the questions you ask based on your upbringing, whereas objectivity is putting your beliefs into it. And I think that whenever I'm reporting, I'm very cognizant of being objective and noticing my bias. I'm going to ask different questions than the next journalist because I think about things differently than them, but it's a matter of staying objective in your reporting and aware of those bias.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, look, we're all human, and nobody's perfect, and people make mistakes. And I'm sure, you read something you wrote 3 years ago, maybe it's you would have done it slightly differently. I would say journalists spend a tremendous amount of time, at least at our institutions, trying to be fair, really trying to be fair in search of the truth. And not everyone's always going to believe us, and that's fine. I also think, while I think that free media is essential to a functioning democracy, absolutely essential, in and of itself, by itself, that's not enough. I mean, you know what I mean? It's not enough to hold back forces and we've seen it all over the world where democracy crumbles, and so does the free media. So it's not like it's a 100% guarantee you're going to have a functioning democracy. So I mean, I do think that there'll always be people who who criticize or don't believe, and that's fine. That's absolutely fine. But I do think that there's like hundreds and thousands of journalists who are trying their best to be fair and nonpartisan every day.
And I saw another question over here in the middle.
Hi, thank you guys for being here tonight. My question is about, you guys spoke about, the algorithm and how it reinforces our partisanship, whichever way that might be. So do you think there is a way to, or, how can people running campaigns use that algorithm to their advantage to not only get the votes of, their base and the voters that are registered to their party that they know are going to vote for them, but to help, sway that undecided voter or those independent voters?
That's good. I recognize you from the Instagram. That's how I don't know. I mean, I think there's people paid a lot of money and who are really good at answering that question.
A lot of money.
I don't know exactly how they do it, but presumably, trying to, well, I mean, I don't know. There's different theories, right? Do you try to expand your base or do you just try to turn out your base? I remember, taking a course in college where it was all about, you win the primary and then you run to the center and you try to, get 50% plus one. That doesn't seem to be how people are doing it these days. So I don't know if the social media is geared towards expanding, a candidate's base, or it's just geared towards riling people up.
I think that we saw a little bit of both this election. I'm sure that a lot of y'all are familiar with the Harris HQ. Their TikTok did incredible this election cycle. I think that there is a way to meet those middle voters, and I do think that as much as Harris HQ did well, the Trump campaign knew their audience and they knew who they were going for. Trump going on Joe Rogan, going on all those podcasts that met those middle voters kind of where they are and spoke to them right where their struggles were, was huge on the Trump campaign's team. I don't necessarily know the exact answer. I know that billions of dollars goes into it. It's staggering, and I just think that there is a way to meet those middle voters. I don't know if it's necessarily like the HQ accounts or if it's more being guessed. I think that this is like one of the first election cycles we saw them on podcasts. I think that there's not even rules about that yet put out. So I think that it's more just meeting voters where they are and where they're getting their content rather than trying to get onto their algorithm. Obviously, they are trying to get onto their algorithm, but it is meeting them like in the media outlets that they're already looking to.
Any other questions? We've got two in the back. And then we'll have time for maybe one more after that.
Hi, what are your views on the future of the Global Press Freedom Index in the United States and internationally? And how does a company like AP respond to requests from certain authoritarian governments if they want to censor a story or a part of a story that don't like? Thanks.
Well, we don't censor stories. We can be kept out of countries, and we can be kept. I was based in Cuba for many years, and I could write whatever I wanted, but nobody would talk to me, you know what I mean? So, it's just hard to get people, not nobody, but like official, if I wanted to do something on agriculture, I couldn't find an official who would actually talk to me. So that's, more effective, frankly, but, we don't hold back stories. Like, we will hold a story back for security, like to get someone out of a country before it's published or things like that if we're really worried, but we don't allow folks to censor us. And we're all over the place. I mean, not just Cuba, we're in North Korea, we're in Russia and Ukraine. We're in Iran, we try to be everywhere. It's more, I think, in general, governments just, they don't tell you to pull a story. It's really hard to kind of find the people that you need to talk to, or people won't talk to you. It's challenging, but I do think it's important to be in those countries and to, I will say one of the things that drew me to being a foreign correspondent and including in places like Cuba is, it's really interesting to see other people's perspective. And I tried always to be really respectful of different points of view that I was getting in different countries that I lived in. And I do think it's really important as best we can to be in those places, but there is a limit. Like, we won't compromise being able to report. If we get kicked out, we get kicked out. But obviously that's not our hope, because I think it's worse if we're not there.
Yeah, and then there was another question back there.
I'm wondering, with your international career, how have you experienced the America's reputation change throughout the last decade?
Well, I've been here for the last 8 years, so 7 or 8 years. Yeah, I mean, my wife is British, so I spend a lot of time around people. Like, people are not shy. That's the thing about being American. You know, it's such a culturally dominant country. Everybody knows what's going on here. So, you know, there are definitely times when it's more challenging to be an American living overseas. People are not shy about telling you what they think about the country. Yeah, and I wouldn't say I felt danger, you know what I mean? I mean, I've been in countries which can be dangerous, but I don't think I ever felt danger about being an American, but you definitely feel kind of, you know, when people are not happy with this country.
Any other questions? All right, well, thank you guys so much for being here. It was a pleasure to host you.
Thank you so much.
And thank you all for coming. Just a reminder, we'll have our first Student Advisory Board meeting next Tuesday at the room in the back of the hall at 5:30. And we'll have also Valentine's Day themed crafts and snacks afterwards. Thank you guys for coming.